So let's take a look. So this was a research study they did on social media usage in the United States. Now, again, this was not done during the pandemic. So this was actually conducted last year. So if you look on the dates, it says they're April 10th, 2019. So again, this was a year ago. But what's interesting is they said that most people using social media still use Facebook, and that hasn't really changed very much. So for example, everybody, look at this first chart. So if you notice here, I'll use my pen to circle. If you notice, the top two social media platforms are YouTube and Facebook, and that was also true in our survey. So, and I would agree that I think most people use these platforms. I noticed that someone did choose Pinterest and someone did choose WhatsApp. So again, a few people in our groups, but as you can see here in the United States, these platforms are not as popular, though I think Instagram has probably changed. I think Instagram is probably more, getting more and more popular. But again, thinking about who uses these platforms. Okay, so it looks like, guys, you're just like all of the other Americans here using YouTube and Facebook. In fact, we had more. We had almost 100% of our group using these things. Now, in thinking about age groups, take a look at the age groups here. So if I zoom in just a little bit more, so again, our age group is that 30 to 49 group. Okay, so if I can highlight it here on the screen. So there we are, the 30 to 49 group. So if you notice here, this is the people who say that they use these things. So for example, for YouTube, if you notice, we're kind of up here. It says that about 90% of people, 30 to 49, there we are, just follow the line there, use YouTube. And it looks like about 76, 78% use Facebook. And again, that's what we have here. We have all of our students here in the group use these things. So guess what, guys? Again, you're just like everyday Americans using these platforms. Though I think it's funny, look at the Instagram. I think this is interesting. I think most young people today, they like to use Instagram more. That's just my opinion. In fact, if you notice, Instagram now and Facebook are about the same. So I think younger people, they like Instagram. One more just quick information to look at. So we were thinking about how many times a day. So this was the last question we looked at. So for example, for Facebook, 51% said they use Facebook several times a day. And guess what? We said more. Everybody said they use these things. Same thing with YouTube, only 32%. So I don't know, guys, maybe we're a little bit more into the social media than the average American. So anyway, I thought this was kind of interesting to share because, when I think about my students, I think a lot of my students are, depending on what country they came from, or maybe how much technology they've used. I think a lot of it depends on those things for using these social media platforms. So in this case, it looks like we're just like a lot of other people here in the United States. Now, before I leave this particular piece of information, what about in your countries? Do you think people use social media, the same social media, as much as we do? So, for example, and what about Facebook? So, for example, in Japan, Asami, Rena, do you think people there use Facebook as much as Americans do?
Yes, I think so. But a lot of young generation didn't use Facebook anymore.
Yeah, I know. Once your parents are on Facebook, nobody wants to use it anymore, right? Yeah, usually
Yes.
when your parents use social media, it's not cool anymore.
Yes.
So Rena, what do young people use in Japan? Is there
I
something
think
else they use?
Instagram is major for younger generation.
Instagram, yeah.
Yes.
I've noticed Snapchat has become very popular too. Again, this was a year ago. So if you notice, guys, something's missing from this list. Do you know which platform is becoming more popular now? Anybody know?
Mm.
It's TikTok.
Oh, TikTok. Yeah.
TikTok.
Yeah. Do you guys use TikTok? Anybody here use TikTok?
No.
No. No.
I heard, but
You've heard of it, Sergey. Okay.
I didn't use.
Yeah. Now, let me tell you something, guys. Do you want a big surprise? Would you like a big surprise? So yesterday, no, 2 days ago, I was talking to my father. Now, my father is a music professor, and he's still teaching. You know, so my dad's going to be 74 years old. He's already 74 years old. So we're talking on the telephone, and my dad said to me, he said, one of his teacher friends sent him a video from TikTok. And I almost had a heart attack. I thought, I can't believe my father said the words TikTok. So I don't know, guys. That was a huge surprise. Can you imagine your parents? Can you imagine your parents saying TikTok? Can you imagine
No.
No. No.
that? Isn't that I mean, so when he said that, I thought, wait a minute, who am I talking to? This can't be my dad. I mean, my dad's on Facebook, you know, like everybody. But when he said TikTok, I just about, I laughed and laughed and laughed. I thought, I can't believe my dad knows TikTok. So, but anyway, I thought that was kind of funny. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this little discussion here, because I always find it interesting to see what kind of technology, what kind of social media my students like to use. So I don't know, maybe I should create a TikTok page for Kenton ESL. Okay, well, now since we're talking about social media, I thought a good expression for us to learn today is talking about how we feel when we use social media, and sometimes how we want to maybe not use so much social media. So I have two expressions for us today. So guys, you can say these with me. To be unplugged. To be unplugged. Okay. And the opposite expression is to be plugged in. To be plugged in. Now, you might know these expressions from electricity. So for example, we plug in our TV, right? We plug in the refrigerator, we plug in computers. But this is talking more about people and how we use these particular things. So for example, the first expression, to be unplugged, means maybe to stay away from social media. So basically not to use it, or to stay away from the internet for a period of time. So, you know, for example, maybe, you know, you've been looking at your phone, you've been spending a lot of time on the computer reading, Sergey mentioned watching YouTube and all these things. And sometimes you just say, okay, that's enough, no more. I want to unplug, you know, I want to stop looking at the internet and social media and so on. So now the opposite expression, to be plugged in, actually is kind of interesting. It's a little bit different. To be plugged in means to be connected to what's going on in the world. So to follow the news, to follow what's happening on social media. So I think in some ways we use this expression to say, like, when we're paying attention to the news. So we're paying attention to what's happening. Maybe we're really plugged in right now to the pandemic and to the news about politics and so on. So if you notice, to be plugged in actually doesn't sound so negative. It just means we're kind of connected with things. But what's interesting is to be unplugged means sometimes we're kind of tired of the internet. We're tired of social media and we want to maybe go away, you know, to stay away. So if you notice my picture here, I thought this was kind of funny. If you see this guy here, he's kind of playing a joke on everybody. Can you see their faces here? They're working in the office. So he has unplugged the computers and now everybody is going crazy. So yes, it's good once in a while to unplug, but make sure to save your information. Yeah, so don't go unplugged and hurt other people. But when we use this expression, I think sometimes we use it to say it's time to take a break. It's time to take a break from social media. So that's my question for the day. So let's look at my question for the day. So guys, when you go on vacation, So when you take a break, you go on a trip or so on, do you like to be plugged in, checking your phone, watching the news, Facebook, social media, or do you like to be unplugged? Okay, well, guys, thank you for sharing that information. So I kind of felt like as we were getting close here to the summertime, that maybe summer is always a good time to unplug a little bit. It's good to relax. I know for me, I'd like to unplug a little bit for a couple of weeks, just because teaching online and being a student online can be stressful. It can be stressful in a different way. Well, once again, our expressions to talk about here for today are to be unplugged, right? So to go unplugged or to be unplugged and to be plugged in. Again, sometimes it's good to be plugged in. Rena mentioned sometimes we can be plugged in too much. So maybe your husband, for example. But I think all of us can agree that maybe once in a while, maybe sometimes it's good to go unplugged. It's good to be away from these things because we need to be relaxed and calm, and it's hard if we're watching the news all the time. But sometimes we need to. Okay. All right, now guys, let me explain what we're going to do next. Right now, unfortunately, Burlington English is not working at the moment. So I think we're, because we're really at the end of our year. Our June 30th is the last day for our kind of like our calendar year. So July 1st is kind of the beginning of the next calendar year. I know it's confusing, but we think at this time that maybe Burlington English is going through a couple of changes. So unfortunately, Burlington English is not working at the moment. So I had a lesson planned using Burlington English, but unfortunately, we can't get to it at the moment. In fact, it stopped working last night, and I didn't know. I was already ready to go, and then suddenly it's not working. So instead, I thought we would just do a little activity because it's kind of talking about our topic, and that is just kind of reviewing a little bit of how to use these two words on the screen. The words for and the words since. So we're going to take a couple minutes and talk about that, and then we're going to do some activities with that. But first, let's talk about how we use these words, and we usually use them more when we use the present perfect. Now, again, we're not going to spend time today talking a lot about the present perfect, okay, because I know we're at the end of the session. Our time, we only really have about one more class, so I don't really want to get into that topic again. But just to review for everybody, so I'm going to clear the screen here. Just to review, the present perfect is used when we talk about actions that began at some point in the past and then continue up to this present moment. So for example, here on the screen, my example is I have lived in Kentucky for 40 years, which is true, by the way. Actually, my family is from Kentucky, but actually I was born in North Carolina, and then I moved back to Kentucky when I was 8 years old. So really, I've lived in Kentucky for 40 years, the state of Kentucky. Now, if you see on at the bottom there, it says, if you remember, the present perfect, we use two things. We use the helping word have. So for example, there it is here, I have. And then we use the past participle of the word live, which in this case is the word lived. So when we put them together, have lived, I have lived, that means, again, the present perfect. I started and I am continued up until this moment. Okay? Now, what we're going to be looking at this morning, though, is actually a little bit more of the second part of the sentence, which is talking about time. Now, this is where sometimes things get confusing for students because these two words that we're going to discuss, for and since, may not necessarily have different meanings in your language. Now, for example, in Spanish, when we use the Spanish language, we actually use these expressions very differently. So often I find that my students are confused using these words for and since. But let's go ahead and look at our explanations, at some examples. And I'm going to ask you guys to help me a little bit with this next part, okay? All right, so first off, here on the screen, here are some sample sentences. So again, notice it says we can use the words for and since with the present perfect to talk about things that started in the past and continue into the present. Okay, now I'm going to ask everybody to help me here. So Sergey, could you read that first example there where it says I've
had a fever for 2 days.
All right, thank you. Okay.
Wow.
Asami, what about the next one?
She's been a patient here for 5 years.
Okay. All right, thank you. Saba, what about the next one?
I've had a fever since yesterday.
Okay, thank you. And Rena, what about the last one there?
She's been a patient here since 2010.
Okay, thank you. All right, now guys, let's take a look. First off, let's find the sentences that use the word for. So I want to circle those. Okay, and let's look at the sentences that have since, and I'll put a box around those two. Okay. Now, what do we notice about those particular examples? So looking at the first two examples, what do we see coming after the word for? So, for example, in the first sentence, we see the words 2 days. In the second example, we see 5 years. Okay. So I want you to think about that for just a moment. Okay, now look at the next one with since. Now the word after the word since, we see the word yesterday. And then here in this last example, we see 2010, which again is, or 2010, which is again a year, a specific year. So part of what we're going to be discussing here this morning is when we use these two particular words with the present perfect, and again, let's just kind of go back to the examples. You guys can just repeat them there with me, there at your computer or phone. Let's say these again. I've had. I've had. Okay, the next one. She's been. She's been. There's that same one. I've had. And the last one, same thing. She's been. So if you notice, the first parts of the sentences are basically the same. But the second part of the sentence, when we use that time expression, for and since, that's where our change is being located. But again, looking at the first parts of the sentence, these are examples of the present perfect. Okay, now let's go to the next screen and see if we can kind of make an idea as to the basic rule. So now on the next screen, so again, over on the left side, I have the examples. So hopefully you can see those there. And now let's look over on the right side. So for example, we want to know which of the two words do we use in these situations. So for example, guys, you can use your microphone or the chat box. Let's look at question number 1 or sentence number 1. It says, we use blank when we want to answer the question, how long? Okay, group, so which word do we use, for or since?
For.
Okay, I hear one vote for for. Do we agree?
For.
Okay, another vote for for. What do you think? Sergey, Saba, what do you think? Do you agree?
Sense.
Okay, I have one vote for sense.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, Saba.
Maybe.
False.
Look what I'm writing.
Oh.
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Yeah, so remember, when we talk about how long, now how long would be things like this. 2 days. 5 years. So when we use for, we're talking about duration, how long. So remember, duration answers that question, how long. So again, examples include years, days. What could be some other duration words that we might use? Years, days. Could there be other?
Weeks.
Weeks?
Hours,
Hours, minutes, months. Yeah.
Centuries.
Centuries. Yeah, I'm curious what we could say. We've been doing what for centuries? But in this case, you're correct. So those are all examples of duration words. So duration words answer how long. Okay, so in this case, we use for to talk about how long. And then we use since to talk about when something started. And I think that's the important thing to recognize, when something started, which means we have something more specific when we use these words. So again, when we talk about when something started, we use specific dates or specific particular expressions of time. So again, for example, we use yesterday. We use a specific year, such as 2010. We can also think about, since this morning, since this afternoon, since Saturday. All of these indicate when the actions began, and we can kind of guess for how long, but we don't say for how long. That's what we use the word for. That's why we use the word for, is to expressly state for how long we do something. Okay, so one more time, we use the word for to use with duration words, for how long. So again, years, days, weeks, hours, minutes, months. And then we use since with specific dates and specific points of time. So again, since yesterday, since 2010, since this morning, since this afternoon, and so on. Okay? All right. So we're off to a good start looking at how to use these two particular words. So let's do a couple of activities just to kind of rehearse and practice what we're learning so far. Okay, now everybody, what I'd like to do for this first activity is I'm going to ask different people to answer these. And so here's what I'm going to do. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4 people. So basically what I'd like to do is for each particular round of numbers, I'm just going to ask us to kind of go around in a group. Okay, so for example, I'm looking at my particular chat box or my participant box. So for example, I would say like Sergey gets to do number 1. Okay, so Asami would do number 2. Okay, all right. Saba would do number 3. Okay, and Rena would do number 4, and then we would just start over. So then Sergey 5, Asami 6. So we just kind of go in a group. All right. So for example, Sergey, number 1, you would say, can you read number 1 there for us, Sergey?
Since July.
Okay, good. All right, Asami, what about number 2? For or since?
Since.
Okay. All right, Saba, what about number 3?
For.
Okay, very good. Okay. Reina, what about number 4?
For.
Very good. All right, Sergey, we're back to you. Number 5.
Since.
Excellent. All right, Asami, back to you for number 6.
Since.
Okay, very good. All right, Saba, you got number 7.
Since.
Okay, now notice it says a year, right? So a year would be 1 year.
It's 4.
4, very good. All right, Reina, back to you for number 8.
For.
Okay, for about 2 weeks. Okay, all right, Sergey, back to you for number 9.
For a long time.
For a long time, very good.
Mhm.
All right, Asami, number 10.
4.
For 10 days. Okay, number 11, Saba.
Since.
Very good. Okay, now things are getting a little interesting. So, Rena, what about number 12?
Since I left school.
Yeah. So we'll talk about this in just a moment. Okay. And Sergey, you got 13.
Since 1997.
Okay.
Okay.
And finally, Asami, you got 14.
4.
Very good. Now, so far, we're off to a great start. Let's take a look at number 12 again, just to kind of see what are we doing. Yeah, so if you notice, often we use the word since, not only to talk about a specific year. So again, let's look at the examples using since. I'll circle them here. So not only just a specific year or since a specific time. Okay, so we'll highlight those. But notice we can also use the word since with another sort of complete idea. So in this case, when we say since I left school, well, what that means is maybe I don't remember the year, right? Let's be honest, guys. Maybe you don't remember when you graduated or maybe when you left school. So in this case, you might just say, well, since I left school. So if you notice, we can use this complete idea to kind of indicate what that specific time might be. So if I'm going to do a little example here at the bottom of the screen. So if you notice, let's create a sentence here. Let's say I have at, let's say, many different jobs since I left school. Okay, so for example, I'll put that on the screen. Okay.
Wear many hats.
Wearing many hats. Very good, Sergey. Wow, you remember that one.
Mhm.
But for
I
example,
remember.
you remember that one.
I-
Okay, good. But for example, if you notice, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the grammar of the sentence. What we're doing here is we're actually connecting two clauses, two complete ideas. And what I'm trying to tell you is the word since can do that. We can use the word since for either a specific time, like since 1997, or we can choose some specific moment in our lives, and you could use it with a complete sentence. So for example, that is possible with the word since, but that is not possible for the word for. So you can't say for I left school or for some particular clause or activity. So in this case, that is another difference between these two words. I can use the word since with another clause. That is possible. So again, if you think about it grammatically, it would be like this. I would have an independent clause. Then I would use the word since. Let's see if I can make that bigger. And then I could use what's called a dependent clause. So in this case, that dependent clause in this situation is what we refer to as a time clause. So it's telling us since some particular time. So believe it or not, the word since can be used in this way too. So if you were not sure, that is also grammatically possible with the word since. Okay, so that's another way to tell whether you're going to use the word for or use the word since. So in this case, number 12 is since some specific moment. In this case, I don't remember the year, I don't remember the month, I just remember this particular activity. Okay, so yeah, you can use the word since in that situation too. All right, so looks like we're, looks like we're getting the basic idea. All right, let's go ahead and move on to activity number 2. Okay, oops. Okay, now what I would like to do for activity number 2, everybody, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give you about a minute to look at the sentences. Okay, so I'll turn off my microphone just for a moment. I'll give you a minute to look at the sentences, and then what I'm going to do is in the chat box, I'm going to put the number. You tell me which word we should choose. Okay, so take about 1 minute, and I'll come back, and then we'll do this activity together. Okay, so I hope everybody's had a chance to look at the 6 sentences. All right, so again, we're not going to use microphones for this activity. Let's use the chat box. So again, we already have number 1, so that's completed for us. So now in the chat box, I'm putting number 2. Tell me what answer you would choose. And again, just put it in the chat box. Okay. All right. Looks like most people have responded. All right. So the answer is 4. Very good. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next one. So number 3. Okay. All right. Again, looks like most people have answered. So the answer is since. Very good. All right. Next one is in the chat box. Okay. All right. Again, most have answered. So the answer is 4. All right. We're off to a great start here. All right. Let's continue. Number 5. All right. Good, Sergey. Good. Good. Okay. All right. Excellent. Everyone's answered this one. Okay. So yes, the answer is since. So as we just mentioned, that would be a complete idea, right? Okay, guys, here we are, the ultimate test. What about the last one, number 6? Okay, everyone has answered and you answered correctly. And the answer is since. And again, same situation. We're not given a particular time, we're given a specific action. So again, for number 5, since I was in school, right? And then number 6, since he woke up this morning, those specific times that we see here. Okay, so let's go back just real quickly. I'm going to ask you guys to read it for me. So let's start with I'll do number 1. My grandmother has lived with us since 2009. Saba, how about number 2? Now read it for us.
I've wanted to meet him for a long time.
Okay, very good. Rena, what about number 3?
We've been here since 8 o'clock.
Okay, very good. Number 4, Sami?
Sam has had that car for about 3 years.
Okay. All right, Sergey, what about number 5?
I haven't done a worksheet since I was in school.
Yeah, that's true for a lot of people, right? And then finally, I'll do number 6. Jim has had a headache since he woke up this morning. Okay, so in this case, looks like we're off to a good start with these. Okay, well, guys, our time is just about up for today. So I'm going to clear the screen here. So once again, right now, Burlington English is still not working. So instead, what I'm going to do is just create a short little activity for you because really next week is our final chat for the summer session. So I'll create one last little assignment that you can do to practice these words for and since. Because right now we don't know, hopefully Burlington English will be back next week, but we don't know right now. So they're, again, we're in the middle between changing from one year to the next. So we may or may not have Burlington English for next week. So I'll contact you with a short little sort of final homework assignment, and it'll be practicing with the words since and for. Now, as I mentioned before, guys, next week is our final summer chat. So again, this is really, it's been a few years since we've gone into July. So, but we wanted to make sure we at least had a couple of classes. Now, next week, we're also going to talk more about registration. In fact, I'll be sending out an email probably tomorrow to talk to you about how we are going to do registration for next year for the fall. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, we are going to stay online at least until October. One reason, of course, is we're still waiting to see what the college is going to do when it comes to students. I think everybody here probably understands that we want to be careful. We want everybody to be safe. You know, right now they've just started talking about what they're going to do at the kindergarten through high school, how they're going to handle that. So I think right now, I know that maybe we would like to be in the classroom at least a little bit. But I think we're going to stay online for a little bit longer just to make sure everyone is safe. So in this case, next week we'll talk more about what we're going to do for August. But I think we're probably going to keep doing this kind of same thing. So we'll probably do this. But we'll also talk to you next week about maybe to see what you would be interested in for our online options. But I do want to let everybody know we're going to be online at least until October. So